serving you a dose of wisdom and humor with a dash of radiance. Welcome to Biscuits and Sunshine with your hosts, Callie and Landra.
Hey y'all, pull up a seat at our table for your next serving of Biscuits and Sunshine. I'm Callie.
And I'm Landra. It makes me hella happy to have you here with us. We're recording this from Distant Sport Audio Studios in Athens, Greece. Welcome to episode 12, Dodika. Pame, let's go. On today's episode, we'll examine the idea of rest in relation to living in a productivity-focused culture.
I like this idea of talking about rest because rest can take many forms, in my opinion. Yesterday, we got together with a group of our friends to do a little bit of Greek folk dancing here. We did it in the center, we did it outside. It was a beautiful morning, and it was such fun. Okay, not necessarily the definition of rest that comes to mind when you think about it, but it felt very restorative for me. It was something that connected not only with the physical activity of dancing for me, but it felt really good to my soul. And for me, it felt restful.
I love that. Yeah, and this is so interesting because I was super excited to join and, we had planned it for a while. And it was one I actually had to sit out. I've been dealing with an injury in my shoulder, and sadly, the last couple of weeks got the information that I'm going to be needing to have surgery. So I literally went to bed the night before after telling everybody, I'll see you tomorrow, and was like, oh, no, I need to take care of my shoulder. So that, in a sense, was a really good kind of real life example of like, oh gosh, I don't want to miss out. I do want to be a part of this, right? And then also feeling like, but I already told everybody I was going to go. And then I was like, no, I need to listen to my body. I have to take care of myself. And it was the right decision, And then also realizing how I really felt restful to me is I rested my shoulder and then I showed up when you guys were done.
You did.
Yeah, and we went to lunch and it was great. And I got to hear all about it. So it's just so interesting.
And we took good videos, so it's not like you won't also be able to learn the steps that we learned.
That's true.
It's really nice, though, to have these experiences with friends when you see them sort of practicing what they preach. This idea of, follow your bliss, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes bliss does look like resting, even though you want to participate, even though there's something that you really want to engage in. So as bummed as I was when you messaged me yesterday morning. And I said, I'm sure there's a way we can work it out, but whatever you decide, I totally support and I understand it. And I'm glad that you did that. I'm actually really glad every time that opportunity comes up for us to have that conversation, because in you prioritizing your rest, you also give me permission to do the same.
Yeah.
Which is really nice.
Yeah. It's interesting, right? And that's what I was going to, mention too, is like the world has just, accelerated so fast. It does feel like we always had to just keep going. Information's coming at us all the time. I mentioned FOMO, that fear of missing out is a real thing. And really like, how much we even take in throughout any given day, processing through our bodies, through our minds, through what, like I said, what we see, there's like the impact of our optic nerve. Like we got to rest.
We're taking in so much all the time.
Yeah.
It's like you think about how much information is transmitted via the internet. Our brains are similar in a way, and we can only probably handle so much.
Yeah, we're not built like computer speed processors.
Exactly.
And so even I'm thinking now about, my move here to Greece and how much, how much it took to like really land here. And I joke, and then I also think that there's some truth to it, that I was like, my body finally caught up. So I do think there is like some truth in kind of needing like the downtime and however that looks like for us.
Rest was something I never prioritized when I was young. Okay, yeah, it's like no one ever thinks about resting in their 20s. And I sort of find now that it rules my list of priorities. I think we've been conditioned, kind of what you mentioned, to think of rest as something negative. Like, oh, you need a break? Oh, you only have so much time for this workday. Like, you got to get everything in. And so I feel like there's this, we have to confront this, our own feelings towards the idea of rest. Sometimes doing that, sometimes asking for a break, sometimes saying, I just can't do it today. There's so much negativity that comes with that. Like you're less committed or you're less able to carry the weight of what it is that you're doing. But we were built for resting. No human can go 100%. Like you said, we're not computers. And if you do try to push yourself to that
Mhm.
limit, you hit burnout. And we're seeing that so often.
Yeah, we'll share a little bit more about when we notice where we might have been hitting our capacity or any sort of burnout. But it's interesting. I think often I do think of this, and when I see it in others, and also absolutely for myself, is what am I running from or what am I running towards? I think this idea of like you got to keep going. It is there like I remember for me there was like a false sense of like I'd mentioned FOMO a lot, but also like if I stop, like oh maybe thinking about it from an entrepreneurial perspective, if I give myself time to rest, like, oh no, maybe I'm not hustling to find that next work. And then what I'm going to miss out on is income or, just keeping myself relevant. So it's just interesting, right? What are you running from or what might you be running towards?
I also think sometimes the industries that we work in or the media that we take in create this false sense of urgency.
That's it.
There are some things that are urgent. If you are an ER doctor, a lot of things in your day are going to be urgent, and rest may not be something you can prioritize. But for me, working in public relations, I'm the type of team lead. I would try to remain real chill about most things,
Hmm.
as long as we are communicating expectations to clients. If we're not necessarily going to be able to hit this deadline, but we've talked about it and they know it's coming, I'm not going to freak out because it's PR, not ER.
Ooh,
I
that's a
say this
good
to my
one.
teams all the time. Not that I don't take it seriously and not that we don't work our butts off,
Yeah.
but it kind of sort of helps us reframe when we get stressed or when we feel that there is this need to sort of push through maybe unnecessarily, taking a step back and thinking,
Hmm.
why? What is the sense of urgency and is it real? Is it based in reality?
Yeah. Yeah, bringing the work thing, we said ER in HR, ER is employee relations, and that usually is like, there's a big crisis, there's a problem, and it can sometimes be a big part of the job, and you can kind of feel like you're constantly being pulled into it. So it does feel like an emergency room kind of response when you said that. I was like, oh my God, yes.
I also work in crisis communication, and so having this mentality of what's real, what is urgent, what can be done tomorrow helps me kind of bring the stress level in a room down a few notches so that everyone can think more clearly.
Yeah, that's
And
so important.
not so much the idea of rest, but it's this idea of what's urgent in real life. And so when we apply that to our personal lives, I think that's where this idea of rest really comes into play.
Yeah, and then I think what I hear in that is like helping people prioritize because when you are in that like crisis mode, you are not in that like, as I talk often about the brain and like when it relates to mindfulness, you're not in your prefrontal cortex where the logic and the reasoning and your rational mind is, right? So you need somebody to be leading people there.
I'm going to start saying that, excuse me, sir, you're not in your prefrontal cortex right now. And so I just need you to take a few moments.
Can you imagine? Oh my goodness,
Oh,
so
I can. And
silly.
that would be so great. Okay, so as we think about rest and we talk about this idea of being able to prioritize it as we can through our days, what are some activities that you find restful? Things that sort of help you work through all the things that we just talked about?
I mean, I love a good nap. I think back actually here when I was taking Greek classes actively, it was 3 days a week. It was like 4 hours a day. And I would walk home, and that felt nice because then I can kind of disconnect from like the mind thinking all the time and just be in my body. But then when I got home, I was just exhausted. And so I would take a nap. And I just felt that actually felt so luxurious because I wasn't napping a lot prior to that. And but I would joke, and I also think there's some truth to it again about like my brain needed time to download. It was like the computer. It was processing all the things I learned in class and, organizing within my brain. So napping, I've mentioned a lot about being in nature. I love hiking. We know Callie does not.
You do you, boo.
Another thing, how I like to rest as well, I've been really loving podcast, but also, like audiobooks. So, just getting a good beverage and just listening to that. I love my balcony right now. It's springtime. So sitting outside while I do that. The one thing I really have had to kind of really be in the habit of is just really do that. So not do a podcast and wash dishes, Not, you know what I mean? Kind of like sometimes I could use that as a way to get through tasks. But I really find rest and just taking in other people's stories, other, information, learning, just doing that and really receiving. That feels like rest to me.
Ugh, such a good thing to bring up as we discuss rest in relation to productivity. Because sometimes, okay, restful to listen to a podcast, but oh, I could also be spending this time doing something productive. And this need we feel almost to fill every moment of our time with activities that are productive in some way. They accomplish our checklists, they make us money, they do all of these things. I remember reading an article a few years ago about how we are losing the ability to really rest. Because
Yeah.
resting isn't sitting on the sofa, like scrolling social media for 2 hours, because that doesn't make you feel rested. Your brain is still engaged in a way.
Yeah.
And how many studies are there about the impacts of social media and this idea of like false reality and how it impacts us mentally and socially? We have to start looking at what rest really is for each of us.
Yeah. And I like that you said that because I think so often, and I kind of cringe a little bit when I'm starting to see or hear self care, and I think sometimes we think rest is all about it has to look a certain way, right? I got to go get a massage. No, it just can be so simple. It doesn't even have to cost anything, but it's being in a relationship to really get clear on what is it for me that is restful. Then what I wanted to say as well is, our nervous systems, it is normal for us to get activated and then to kind of come down, this like arousal up and down. The problem is when, like you said, scrolling on social media, maybe that's one way, but there's just so much other things that can really get you into hyper arousal. And it's a hypervigilance. And it's when we stay there, when our system is so activated there. And sometimes we're not even aware of it. We just live in that state. And so the more we can be aware of that, and it's like, how do we bring ourselves down to kind of find more of that? Like, really, it's like your own window of tolerance, what works best for your system. Because what works best for me, we talked about in rest, is going to look different for somebody else. And our systems just kind of run a little different. So I think, too, when we think it's about, I just have to find the Zen state, not necessarily. It's like finding just that in between, that balance.
I really can't wait for my mom to listen to this episode because generally they're 8 hours behind us. So I'm generally talking to them like either my mom stays up late, so I'll talk to her at the beginning of the day or the end of the day, and I'll be on the phone with my parents at night,
Hmm.
and they'll want to like talk politics or something will happen during the day, and we'll start to get into a like political discussion. Inevitably, I say, I can't do this right now. I have to be able to go to sleep. Like I can't put my system back in that state of arousal and be like totally mentally focused and totally mentally on, and maybe even upset at the turn of events in the world. So Mom, just take note, please. No, I'm just kidding. Because I know she thinks like, oh, you've checked out of whatever, whatever. But it's not the case. It's just I have to be very aware of like when I turn that on and when I turn that off.
I think that's so good, Callie, because it's really important, again, to kind of know, where our boundaries lie. Just the awareness alone, I know you're in choice about how to say yes or no, and probably what do you do after you get off the phone to kind of bring yourself into rest mode for sleep mode. So that's a really good, real example. I like that you shared that.
To me, it all comes back to I mentioned this at the beginning. I'm a firm believer in when you do things that help you prioritize your health and rest, not in a selfish way, but they help you sort of create a very comfortable system for yourself. You give other people permission to do the same. I think this sort of philosophy rules my life in many ways.
Yeah.
Like, I think about this move that I've made and how my life looks different. I work in the mornings, I take a break for lunch, I take a nap, and then I log back on to work with like my American-based teams. That system is so outside the norm, but it works so well for me. I feel like my work in the morning gets great results. My work in the afternoon gets great results because I'm able to sort of find a balance and be able to create moments of rest in the day for me.
Yeah.
And who knows, someone sees that. Not to say that we're all inspiring everyone all the time, but someone sees that and goes, oh, that's an interesting way to do things. I've never thought about that.
Hmm. When you said a little bit ago, and it just kind of is like hanging in my mind, I want to address, as you said, not in a selfish way. As women, I feel like that's such a thing we have to sometimes validate why we've earned rest,
Yeah.
why it's okay. And yeah, I was like, if you need it, you got it. Take it. But I think so often we on our to-do list, and we're here as two women without children. So you put children in the mix, right? Sometimes it probably is the feeling of you come last. But gosh darn it, you have to put yourself first. I think of so often how kind of my relationship to rest. And, again, the world was different, but the women in my family, one of the things that they did was always go, go, go. And so I think when I hit my burnout, what I realized, a big aha was like, wow, how much it was modeled for me to not put myself first. And so that has been a journey. And realizing that when I do take care of myself first, when I do kind of take a bigger, like I need to get off the grid or whatever it is, how much more I'm able to show up for people in from a more rested place. And I remember this back in retail when that was where the burnout happened. And I was just so like, just not fun to be around. And literally my family one holiday was like, it's best actually maybe if you weren't even here, if you took care of yourself and then like show up when you're you.
It's like this whole conversation around sick days. Yes, okay, you can come to the office sick, but the quality of your work is not going to be good. You're going to sort of elongate this like sickness period, and you could get other people sick. Take the time you need, nip it in the bud, come back fully rested, fully recovered, and let's get to it.
Yeah. No, it's so good. So I'm hoping that if there's anything, dare I say, quotation marks, good that came out of the pandemic, is that we hopefully have had time to examine some of that. And like what you said, like not going into the office sick, hopefully doing some things that, when you are starting to feel signs of sickness, that you're really taking care of yourself.
I definitely think that's a good thing that we can say that came out of the pandemic, this reexamination of rest and how it relates to work culture and life and all of these sorts of things.
Yeah. I realized we just kind of kept rolling. Did I ever ask you what restores you? Where do you find rest? Well, you mentioned your naps, yes.
Naps are definitely a big thing in my day. Like a good 20-minute nap is all I need, and I'm ready to go. I also find rest in creative projects. And it's interesting because it's not always. Sometimes I paint and I'm like, oh, this was great. I feel like I've left it on the canvas. I feel really good. Sometimes it stresses me out all the time. Like that whole day, even if I try several different things, it's just stressful. So it just depends really on where I am. Rest isn't something that I can force, but I do think I'm getting better at recognizing when I need it, which I think in and of itself is a huge win.
That is. Bravo, Sue.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Something you said earlier makes me want to discuss between us and now everyone here. How do you prioritize and balance rest when sort of culturally you're not supposed to need it at all?
Right, right. Well, I think there is a time and a place too. I want to say that because there is some times where it's just like it's go mode, and there are deadlines that need to get done and time differences that kind of plays into a lot of sometimes this, working later, right? But then if I do that and I know I'm like up later, then I will give myself the grace of not setting a morning alarm. And then it's also looking at my schedule of like, where am I building in time? So not going back to back with meetings. This was really helpful when I was in the corporate world is I literally would use my calendar and just block it as like, I wouldn't say what it was, but it was like personal time. And like, to me, that meant like walk the block. It was like, get outdoors, get some sort of movement, build a class in at the end of the day, especially if I knew it was like a really, like going back to ER, employee relations, if I knew it was a really charged day, there was really some tough stuff I really had to be on for people before I could actually physically go back into my house. I knew I had to like do something that was like working it out, literally.
I love this idea of planning rest because you're right. In every season of life, you aren't able to prioritize rest. If you're a parent, it's very hard. I see this with everyone that I love who has children. It's very hard to prioritize rest when you're trying to keep 5 little ones alive.
Yeah.
But if you can at least be aware of the fact that you need to find a place in the week to put a moment of rest, then I think it's a great step in the right direction. Even if it is just a 15-minute, even if it is just a 30-minute something, it doesn't have to be a full day of massage and spa and all these things,
Right.
which sometimes social media says to us is rest. But it can just be, okay, maybe I can try to have 30-minute moment of quiet time where I'm just reading the newspaper and having a cup of coffee, and there's no one in the house but me.
Yeah.
Maybe it's something of that nature, because I know that sometimes our lives can look like magic compared to folks who have all of these responsibilities and live very much in a system that says rest is not important.
Mm-hmm.
But I do absolutely know there are moments that you can take, and planning them out also gives you permission to say, oh, no, I can't do this on Tuesday at 1:30 because
Right.
I already have something on my calendar.
Yeah.
What did I say earlier? Oh, my day didn't turn out as I thought it would.
Yeah.
This idea of scheduling things that work for me, just like I work for other people.
Yeah. And also not being so rigid in the schedule. I know sometimes you'd be like, no, it's not scheduled. I can't do it. So, and giving yourself permission to like let that shift and change. As you were speaking, I'm thinking we need to figure out an acronym for rest. And what I came up with so far was rejuvenate, energize. What would be the S and the T?
Sustain.
Ooh, sustain and
T. So say it again.
oh yeah, rejuvenate. Oh, so thinking of rest, again, we were saying like, doesn't need to look like a massage or like a nap. So think about it. It's an activity that rejuvenates you, energizes you, sustains you.
Treats you?
Ooh,
Maybe?
I like treat.
Maybe. And maybe it isn't all four things each time.
No, but it's pick something that
Yeah.
because again, it kind of, what I like about that is like, it starts to bring images to mind. When you said treat, you know exactly what I thought of?
Ice cream?
Ooh, yes. Pagoto. Okay, yes. Yesterday it got so nice and warm. We both
That's what I was
independently
thinking.
stopped for ice cream. Gelato at this new place by my house. No, but treat, yeah, like just something like sweet, like a little, I mean, there's so many treats here in Greece. I like that. Yeah. So something like, because again, it's going to look different for all of us, but just I want, all of us to be thinking about like, what is it? What rejuvenates, what energizes? Yeah.
I like a good acronym. I think that's really good.
I know
Look,
you do.
Be on the lookout for the merch in a few months, y'all. We mentioned earlier that rest isn't something that can take center stage at every season of life, but it reminds me of this story that I learned, this like lesson that I learned my first year in PR from a woman who worked in the agency and was probably about 20 years ahead of me in her career. She said that there are moments, there are projects, there are seasons where you are going to work harder than ever. But you have to remember, it must come to an end. If it's a project and there's a deadline and it's done, it's simpler. If it's 18 years of raising children, no, it doesn't end at 18. But this idea that it can't be forever, you can't run at breakneck speed for your whole life. You have to really sort of find opportunities to commit and then think, okay, this is going to be the season where I try to bring rest more to the forefront. I remember always saying, I just got to get to the weekend. Just got to make it through this week, get to the weekend.
Yeah, 100%.
And then I thought, wait, I say this every week. I can't just live for the 2 days that we get, because how many times are weekends restful? Generally, they're filled with chores, they're filled with cleaning, they're filled with all these things.
And what I find is that there is like a misalignment with what I'm actually doing for work or doing that week. Yeah.
As we work 5 days a week super hard, and then we like break down for 2 days. And if you don't have kids, maybe it just means watching Netflix and sitting in bed. If you do have kids, it's full of birthday parties, it's full of baseball practices, it's full of swim meets, it's full of all the things that make life robust and full, but it doesn't always feel restful.
So I'm so aware, we've been talking so much about rest. And again, it is like in contrast to productivity. But I'm thinking, what is it about productivity? What is it about really this like something that we maybe feel like we have to keep going? I want to explore that a little bit more. And like one thing I'll just share is like, what I've noticed for myself and others is, you have a hobby or something that you love doing, and how immediately there's a thought of like, how do I monetize this? And so much there's this talk of, what's your side hustle? And that's a whole nother thing I can go down of like, why do we need a side hustle to begin with? Because of maybe not being able to make enough money and right, we got to figure out something else. And that's a whole nother thing. But yeah, like it's just so interesting. Why do we feel like we have to keep going? We have to keep producing. And it's almost like a little bit counterculture to think to just do something like you said about doing art and then just like letting it be art and not trying to like market it. That's interesting, I think, to think about or to
Every time
discuss.
every time I've tried to turn my hobbies into, like, money-making ventures, they become so laborious for me. It's something that is no longer fun. And now I should probably unpack that mentally and why it is that way, but I have come to terms with the fact that all of my creative pursuits are not meant to produce money. And this was something I really had to confront because I'm thinking, "Ooh, I like to paint. I have a goal of like, yeah, I wanna sell that." No, I don't really. I don't.
Mhm.
Because then it changes my experience with this restful activity. It doesn't feel restful anymore.
Yeah.
I also think there are deep-seated sort of pulls to productivity that we as a culture have experienced over the last 100, 200 years. Because as we get more specialized and as we develop more technology, we have more free time, but also less free time.
Yeah, isn't that such a weird paradox? I've been thinking about that.
Very strange. Like you think about 300 years ago when people were farming, there was only so much you could do in a given day.
Yeah.
You can't force something to grow faster. You can't harvest when it's not ready. But for us, you can always do something more. We have all of this information. We have all of this technology. We have all of these things happening. And they think that we feel compelled to fill that time.
Mm.
And I think it's counter to really kind of who we are in our human nature.
I mean, you can't see us right now, but I'm literally like hands in the air as Callie's speaking. Oh my God, that's like reminding me. I say so often, like, how do we come back to our true nature? And I think you just said it because we are organic, right? We are everything that the earth is. And like it takes time for things to grow. When you said that, I was like, oh. And I think sometimes too, we can feel like, especially if you're starting a new pursuit, and maybe it is your own business, and you see other people, you start looking around and it's like, oh, how come they're doing it so fast? And I have to remind myself if I get caught in that of like, there's a lot of hard work you're not seeing. There's a lot of them out there planting the seeds, like tending to the garden, whatever it is, they're so not a farmer, but doing all that you got to do, plowing and all that, right? Watering, taking time. And yeah, it's just so interesting, right?
We talked about this at lunch
That's
yesterday,
what I was pulling from. Yeah.
right? I remember Dorothy saying, I could do this, but do I want to?
Yeah.
It's this question of, oh, I see this person, they're being successful, I have these skills, I can do this too, but do I want to? Does it
Hmm.
light me up? Does it feel restful? Are these things that feed my soul? If we're going to use the organic example, how am I being fed by this activity?
Yeah.
You always say, does it make you feel something? Does it make you feel good? Does it make you feel tingly? Does it make you feel full in your soul?
Hmm.
Or does it make you feel anxious? Does it give you the sweats? Is it like something that
Yeah.
isn't maybe necessarily totally aligned with what you want?
Yeah. Yeah. It's going back to that again, innate intelligence, the, organic nature that we are. Yeah. I love that. One thing I thought of too, a practical thing that we can do, and it came into my mind from a mindfulness perspective, and I would do this often during the workday, but it's helpful in any really capacity to do. And it comes from, I believe it's John Kabat-Zinn, a mindfulness teacher. He talks about stop. And the practice literally, so we love a good acronym. Every letter stands for something. It is the S is stop. The T is take a deep breath. Maybe one, maybe two, maybe three. The O is to observe. So observe what's happening around you, but also what is happening inside of you. So Callie, like you said, am I getting like that? Ooh, this is like exciting, right? Or is it like, oh, wow, I'm tired. What can I do for myself? Because in the observing, then there's choice about how we take care of ourselves. Once we know, we can take action. And then the P is just then proceed. It could be as simple as in between meetings or say end of the day, going to pick up kids from school. You could just be in the car somewhere. You don't have to tell anybody you're doing it. You just stop there, take a deep breath. You might do it right now. And then noticing what's occurring inside you, what's occurring around you. All right, Palme, let's go. Keep going about your day.
I think that's such a great place to end. I really do. And again, the conversation can always continue on social media. Feel free to reach out to us there. We also leave little questions and polls on the episode in Spotify, so we're open to so many forms of engagement. As we wrap up another serving of Biscuits and Sunshine, we want to thank our amazing team of supporters and cheerleaders who are beside us through this adventure. We also wouldn't be here without you. If you're listening on Spotify, do fill out those questions I just mentioned. Make sure to also rate and follow us as well. We love your feedback.
Our hope for you this week is that you examine your relationship to rest and productivity and prioritize some time to explore integrating more moments of rest into your life.
If you love what we're serving up, be sure to subscribe and rate us on your favorite streaming platform. Also head over to Instagram and give us a follow at Biscuits and Sunshine, all spelled out. This is Biscuits and Sunshine with Callie and Landra.